and today I will be talking to you all about this topic, homosociality. Now, just on what the name sounds like, anybody may have an idea, besides Dr. Maharaj, of course, of what homosociality could possibly mean? Anybody? Nobody?
Great. Social interactions with one of the same sex, because homo means same, so of the same.
Right. Okay. And that's basically that's the most simplistic way of putting it. And anytime you look at this word, that's the first thing that will come to mind. Homo meaning same, and same sex. Well, homo doesn't mean same sex, but homo referring to same, and sociality referring to relationships, social relationships. So you kind of get the idea that what this is referring to is relationships, social relationships between people of the same sex. And that's basically what it is. But from now until however long my presentation is going to take, what I hope to do is to show you all what someone by the name of Sedgwick is saying about the complexity of this thing, and that theorizing about relationships between men is not as simple as it may seem and as it may sound. It's a very complicated, very messy thing, alright? So, like I said, there was someone by the name of Eve Kosofsky, I think, Sedgwick, and she was the one who really popularized this whole notion of homosociality. Now, obviously, as long as human beings have existed and as long as men have existed, the concept of relationships between men, these bonds that men have, obviously would have always existed. But what Sedgwick did was she really started to theorize on these relationships and seek to explain these relationships. So she's the one who really popularized this thing. But Sedgwick, she drew up her theory or her concept drawing from the work of other scholars, like people like Michel Foucault and not so much Sigmund Freud, but the reason why I put his name here is because I ran across something that he said about homosexuality, which is related to the whole concept of homosociality, which we'll go into. And I think it would be nice to kind of interrogate what Freud said from a homosocial point of view. So a little bit later on, we'll try to do that. Now, during the course of the presentation, we will come across a couple terms and even some theories like queer theory, terms like homophobia, erotic triangles, the lesbian continuum, uncomfortable looks you people are giving me. And all of these things will come up, and all of these things will seek to help us better understand what this whole concept is all about. Now, I know I put some things there on the right-hand side, personal experience, 12th Night Waiting for Godot, a song text, and a text from a sitcom. I know we may not have the time to go through all of them, but we will try to do as much as we possibly can in the time that we have. All right. Okay, so Sedgwick. What Sedgwick is doing, like I said before, is she is basically theorizing about relationships. That's all she's really doing. She's talking about relationships, but she's talking about relationships between men. Alright, we'll get to the woman later on and what she has to say about that and all the complications related with that. But for right now, what we're talking about is how Sedgwick deals with the relationships between men. So what she's saying is that there are these social relationships that exist, right? So that I tried to put it in the form of a diagram to kind of help you all who are more visual kind of understand what she's saying. So she says that there are these social relationships, these relationships that exist between men. And inside this big category of relationships that men can have, you have all of the possible types of relationships that can occur. So you have relationships, homosocial relationships like friendships between men. You have homosexual relationships being included in that category of possible relationships that men can have, and that makes sense because it is a relationship between two men. And then there are a range of other possible relationships that men can have with each other. So what she did really was she spoke about a continuum. Alright, and this is how she kind of puts the whole thing across in terms of a continuum. This is how she conceptualizes it. She says that there is this continuum, and on one end of the continuum we have homosocial relationships between men. So these would be friendships. And on the other end of the continuum we have homosexual relationships between men. And what she's saying is that on this end you have this, and on this end you have this. And in between that space, you have a sort such a wide range of other possible relations that you can have between men. So the whole thesis, I would say, or the mission, the mission might be a better way of putting it. If we had to say one about Sedgwick's work in homosociality, is to really say that what she's trying to do is to deconstruct that whole concept of juxtaposing heterosexuality with homosexuality and trying to explain everything in terms of that. Alright, so as you would probably guess by now, homosociality refers to the problematization of men's relationships with other men. Simply meaning that what she's doing is she's complicating how we have traditionally understood relationships to be. And she's saying that it's something that is problematic, it's something that's very complicated, something that's very messy. It's not as clear-cut and as easy as we've traditionally believed it to be. Reason being is because male friendships, so homosocial relationships, and male sexual relationships, which would be homosexual relationships, exist on the same continuum. So it's one continuum of relationships that men have. And on one end you have homosocial relationships, and on the other end you have homosexual relationships. And the point that she's stressing, and the root of why all of this is so complicated, this dynamic of relationships between men is so complicated, is because they exist on the same continuum. And on a continuum, there are no distinct and separate states, meaning that basically no one is either completely heterosexual or completely homosexual, because you exist on this continuum, well, men that is, exist on this continuum where there's so much complication between the relationships that you can possibly have, so much possibilities, so to say.
So not women, only men.
Well, we will get to women and what she says about women, but right now this is how she deals with men. So her point throughout her discourse is to overturn stereotypes and demolish binaries, primarily the hetero, homosexual, and cisgender. Anybody know what a binary is?
0 to 1.
Well, it has to do with gender, right? So male and female. So
Well, it doesn't have to be strictly about gender. A binary is kind of like where you have opposition. So you have like two things, and you kind of understand them in terms of being different from one another. So night and day would be a binary. You understand night because it's different from day. Man and woman would be a binary. Woman is different from man. That's how you understand it. So that's the same thing that she's saying about homosexuality and heterosexuality. She's saying that there's this binary that has existed, and this is how we've always understood it. And we would always explain. You would explain me as either, well, traditionally you would explain me as either being a heterosexual woman or homosexual woman. And that's how we would understand things. And what she's saying is that it's so much more complex than it. That's not sufficient enough. So what she's trying to do is to deconstruct this binary and to show the complexity of it. So this is a nice little quote. She didn't say this, but someone said this about her, and I thought it was quite effective, so I put it in. Eve Kosofsky Sedgwick brings out the unnaturalness of the binary, which she argues to a large extent structures modern thought. Why indeed is it that when asked about someone's sexual orientation, most people assume they're being asked whether someone is straight, gay, or bisexual? Now, I personally wanted to interject within here that I think the very concept of bisexual in itself already challenges that binary. Because if you're saying that the binary is that you can either be heterosexual or homosexual, and then evidently in our society today we see that there are people who are bisexual, so it must mean that there are more possibilities than simply being homosexual and heterosexual, because bisexual people do exist. Alright, so I think that in itself challenges the binary. So rather than whether they are gerontophiles, I hope I pronounced that correctly, size, for fetishes. So what this is basically saying is that we understand people in terms of their sexual identity. Their sexual identity has some kind is some kind of a determinant of your individual identity. And if you're sexual, if my sexual orientation, if I'm a heterosexual, that defines and informs, not so much defines in its entirety, but informs to a large extent my individual identity. And this is how we understand people. At least this is what this is saying. So why is it that when you ask someone, so if I ask you, what are you? You would immediately think I'm asking about whether you're gay or you're straight. Why is it that I have to be asking about whether you're gay or you're straight? Why can't